He's president of the FAU Dems, and Nick, welcome.
Hi. When I walked up to the front steps of the library, the first question I heard was, where are all the young people? Why didn't you bring any of your friends? Where are all of you? Let me begin by answering where I was on Election Day, November 2024. After months of hard work registering new voters on the breezeway at Florida Atlantic University, I was still only 17 years old. My birthday was 3 weeks away until I could turn 18 and become eligible. But that day, from dawn till dusk, when the polls opened at 7 a.m. and closed at 7 p.m., we were fortunate enough to have a station right here on campus where we could vote. Oh, perfect. People could vote right on campus. So we got support from a couple of political action committees to rent out just 2 golf carts. Me and another volunteer drove around for 12 hours that day, making sure that students walking along the breezeway through their classes, preparing for the final season at the end of the fall semester, knew that this was the last day to vote. Many of them we had registered, and many of them had forgotten. We asked them, have you voted? No. Are you registered? Yes. Do you want to vote? We'll drive you there and drop you off. They said sure. So we drove a couple of hundred FAU students to the polls. But ever since, youth organizing has fallen into a little bit of a lull here in Florida, and I have to admit in Palm Beach County, because youth organizing isn't really anybody's priority. So when we go back to ask, where are all the young people, we have to start by asking, what matters to them?
Pell Grants are being canceled.
The Department of Education is all but shut down. But I have to begin by saying that as all of you go out and demonstrate for national issues, protesting Trump's tariffs, his immigration policy, his academic policy, and goodness knows what other shit he's going to come up with next week, the front line comes down to state and local policy, the way that it manifests in the university community. Just last week, 6 FAU students who were here on F1 visas had them revoked without explanation. They were legal, they had updated their status, nothing had happened. Within the past month, 4 out of the 6 major public universities in Florida signed on to a 287G agreement, deputizing every single university police officer as an ICE agent. If you get pulled over for a rolling stop at Florida Atlantic University, they can ask you for your passport. Not only that, but the Board of Governors has decided that a little under half of the courses that were university curriculum just a few months ago are too woke. They were cut because they dealt with issues of race, sex, and class. Now, when you cut race, sex, and class out of the classroom, I've got to admit, there's not an awful lot left. Here's the thing. When I talk to young people on the breezeway, they don't want to be Democrats. They disagree with what Trump is doing, but like Chair Free told us, the Democrats had an approval rating of 29%. Young, white, straight males, just like me, shifted more than 10 points towards Trump in the last election. And if you want to know why, it's because the Democratic Party isn't very cool. I'm a Democrat because I'm not a Republican. I wish I could be a proud Democrat. We have a lot of time to turn that wish into a reality, because midterms are just a week away, just a year away in 2026. It's coming up pretty soon. And we also have a gubernatorial race. We have referendums on the ballots that are going to turn out youth voters just like they did in 2024. There are initiatives coming up to legalize weed. There are initiatives coming up to expand Medicaid. All of these things bring voters to the polls because that's where we can hit them at home. Let me tell you a bit more about youth organizing in the 2024 season. I have to give credit where credit is due. We got a tremendous amount of support from the Florida Future Leaders PAC, led by Jaden D'Onofrio, a student up at FSU. Right now, he is only 19 years old. The FAU College Democrats would not exist without him, because in September, I saw a flyer up on the wall in the breezeway saying, "We are hiring campus organizers." I was still only 17 years old, but for years before, ever since Trump first took office in 2016, I've been looking for a way to make myself useful and get involved in politics, to get organized on the ground. I looked at the Florida high school Democrats. Honestly, all they did was meetings. I looked for other local youth organizations, but they did little more than raise awareness on Instagram instead of mobilizing students to register to vote and learn about their rights. Jaden's Florida Future Leaders PAC hired 3 of us on campus to organize and make a difference on campus by registering students to vote, making sure they had their voter ID cards, and had a plan to turn out to the polls on election day. Thanks to Jaden's initiative. Turnout on the FAU campus was over 100%. Now, you may be asking, how is that even possible? How does turnout go over 100%? It's because before the election registration, before the voter registration deadline happens, students can update their address. So even though at the original part of the year, where they determined how many voters were in our districts, hundreds changed their addresses because they came from out of state, and we helped them change their addresses. All of them turned out to vote because there was investment, organization, and marching orders. Now, as we reflect on youth organizing, I have to say, we are not without fault. You know, as I'm sure you're familiar with, at some party organization or other organizational group, there's infighting. In fact, just a week before the election, a certain chapter president somewhere in the state of Florida asked Jaden for a $80 reimbursement for coloring books because they and their officers needed to de-stress before the elections. It was turned down, and they didn't take kindly to it. Unfortunately, because of that incident, there is a small minority of chapter leadership that is completely against the Florida College Democrats working with the Florida Future Leaders PAC at all, because they think that they aren't responsive. Now, if there was ever a case for state leadership to come down and crack heads and set things straight, it would be here, because there is no accountability. There are no marching orders, and there is no financial support. As midterms approach, we are raising money to make sure that we can do the same thing that FFL PAC helped us with, because unfortunately their priorities have shifted. They are investing a lot of very, very hard-earned money into municipal races. They are contributing dramatically to the Take Back Local program. Just last month, they won an important municipal election in the Gainesville area by over 17 points. But money is tight, and they're not sure if they can help us during the midterms because they can't raise money in a state whose leadership is dominated by a party bureaucracy that I've got to admit is very old. We want to make sure that the Florida College Democrats have all the resources they need to organize. I'd like to tell you a story about a class I took this year, a fantastic class taught by Dr. Nicole Anslugger, America in the 1960s. FAU has this fantastic program, the Osher Lifelong Learning Center, where they invite people over the age of 65 to audit classes. By coincidence, more than half of my fellow peers in America in the 1960s were born or lived through the 1960s. So every day we started class with a bit of a political discussion, especially because so much of the progress made by the civil rights movement, the women's rights movement, the free speech movement is currently being undone by the administration, both in Washington, D.C. and in Tallahassee. My neighbor is an 80-year-old former lawyer, and he asked me when we were approaching midterms, why aren't you guys protesting? Why aren't you turning out? Back in my day, if the state administration was pulling this shit, they would have to bore down the windows of this classroom. We would be putting roses in the, barrel rifles. But there are no students because it is incredibly difficult to organize through the Florida Democratic Party. The brand is toxic. We have been working on that. Just last week, we met with 2 representatives from the ACLU to spread Know Your Rights literature and sign people up for a watchdog program where they could keep track of ICE activity on campus. After all, they've been cooperating with Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, the Highway Patrol, and every FAU PD officer is a deputized ICE agent. So we keep track of their activities and make sure that no constitutional rights are being violated. For them to be held accountable, they need to be seen. This is the type of message that resonates with young people because it doesn't focus on what a caucus thinks or needs. It doesn't require a meeting to happen, and it doesn't take bureaucracy to sit through. You show up, the ACLU tells you, here's what we need, give us a call if you see anything. 5 minutes, in and out. And not only that, but the ACLU is respected across the state and the country. People know that their constitutional rights are important, they just aren't confident that the state Democratic Party is capable of defending them. It's a sad thing to say, but we've turned to a broad coalition of other organizational groups, such as the ACLU, such as the Florida Immigration Caucus, and the Florida Future Leaders PAC to give us all the support we need to effectively organize on campus. I think I'm going to go ahead and turn us to Q&A.
Okay. Just as an aside, Pocket Should Be Visibles is working with a funding program to hire FAU Dems to get out there and collect voter registrations and do table setups at the university. So we're working on that, and the more money that they can get. We also have a donation link over there for to help us get all of this stuff done. So on your way out, if you could make a donation, that would help us out. So let's have a couple of questions here. Over there.
Hi, my name is Philip. It restores in me a sense of hope to hear you speak today. I'm a 64-year-old organizer and activist who never in a million years thought I would find myself here at this age and in this state. Secondly, any state Democratic Party or connection that does not support you needs to be pushed aside, because you hold the future for all of us here. And I will stand here and tell you, I will stand side by side with you at FAU any day you want, support you, engage with you, invite you to protest with us. I think that, one of the things that Nikki had mentioned, which I have to say you're right, our protests that we have done here have had an enormous impact. Tesla stock is down 70%.
What's your question?
So the question is, how do we engage more with you?
We want to help you, and we would really, really like you to help us. Just last February, as I'm sure some of you might have heard, FAU was conducting its second university presidential search. The first had failed a year before because Randy Fine wasn't selected one of the finalists. Coincidentally, the state decided that the questionnaire they sent out to find candidates was too woke. So they tried again, and instead of Randy Fine, they found Adam Hasner, who is a former Republican majority leader in the state house, and also an executive of the GEO Group, a private prison company that specializes in immigrant detention. That protest was our dress rehearsal, because for the first time in a long time, FAU saw a protest that attracted 150 people, most of them spontaneously, not members of the FAU Democrats, but from student groups like the Latino Hispanic Association, who felt strongly about the issue and could join us in that fight. That was impactful. But it was only one protest, and even though we can go out and demonstrate for one day, the powers that be, from the university administration all the way to the White House itself, is working every day. So our strategy for the next year revolves around massive resistance, a little bit like what Chair Free told us about, the Southern strategy. We want to make it literally impossible for them to enact their agenda. We want demonstrations across the board on a regularly occurring basis. We want to focus on student government candidates that can exert pressure on the administration from within and hold them accountable to a higher standard. We want bad press. We want to constantly be in the news saying FAU is doing this, this, and this. We want to be in touch with their donor bases because that's where it really hits them. We want to say, are you comfortable, as an alumnus of Florida Atlantic University, sending your money to a police department that pulls over students and asks them for their papers? Can you in good conscience contribute to that university? And the answer is no. So a single demonstration is just one day, but we want to turn next year into a concerted campaign across the entire year, working with groups like Indivisible to contribute to the volume of our protests, working with your press contacts and your donor contacts to finance and add oomph to our message. And I mean, I'll be in touch, because we gotta get one done.
Any question over here?
We teach in higher education. She's a professor at Palm Beach State, and I teach at FAU. Hold on. I can't stress how scary it is that the police department at FAU has been deputized to take students out of classrooms, to take them off the streets, to take them out of any facility, okay? It's like the Gestapo. I'm sorry to have to say this, okay? So when he talks about what you can do, you need to be heard. It is a public university. These are not private universities. These are public universities that are funded with taxpayer dollars. And this is being allowed. And unfortunately, most of you do not know who the president of FAU is right now, okay? So my question is, you know, maybe you can talk a little bit more about how the public can learn about these things and respond. The president of FAU was a former executive at GO, which is a private prison company, just so you know. So maybe you can expand on that a little bit so people understand it's happening right here in this community.
It's local and it starts here, because I have to admit it is difficult to stay in touch with what's happening at FAU and what the FAU Dems are doing if you don't know that the FAU Dems exists. We're new. We're young and we're new, and we haven't been around since the start of this year thanks to the FFL PAC. And we hope to stay around because the FAU Dems chapter has cropped up and then died back down, and we've really struggled to have that much momentum going unless it's election season. That is exactly the issue that Chair Fried recognized, that the Florida Democratic Party can't just come in every 2 years and ask for your vote. We need that year-round organizing. And of course, there's the electoral component, there's the demonstration component, but we also just need to make sure that we're in touch with groups like the Palm Beach County DEC, and in touch with groups like the Indivisibles PAC, and all the other associated groups and caucuses that keep in touch with this wonderful group of people, because I want you to know what's going on at FAU and how you can help.
Okay, question up front here.
Hi. First of all, when you get home tonight, tell
What's
your
that?
parents. When you get home tonight, tell your parents, well done. You're just amazing.
They're in the audience. I spoke there with them.
Yeah, as a member of the League of Women Voters of Palm Beach County, I've registered a lot of young people in high schools. Most of them registered Republican because, like you said, the Democrats, not cool. They consider us a bunch of white hairs on walkers. Seriously, that's what one person has told me. How do we... Mine's red, okay. How do you make us, how are we going to become cool? Cool enough so that everybody wants to be on our team. What's your platform? I mean, how are you going to change this, how people think about the Democratic Party? We're not a bunch of old white hairs on walkers.
Very, very true. If I could sum up my platform in a single word, it would be mind your own damn business. Because that is the problem with the authoritarian platform of the Republican Party. This is the promise of conservatism, that someone in elected office knows how to live your own life better than you do. And if there's one thing that young people don't like, it's people telling them what to do. I mentioned the 60s because back in the day, back in the 60s, young people were at the front lines. They were at the cutting edge of national progressive politics. And now they don't seem to be anywhere to be seen. They need to be mobilized, they need to be organized. So to answer your question about making the Democratic Party cool, I think you have to include both in your messaging and in your actions young people, but it's also an institutional problem. I'm quick to criticize the Florida Democratic Party because I know that there's hope for them. They are an incredible group of people with an incredible massive resources. I think that delegating those resources to college campuses, to groups like the Florida Democratic Party, to groups like Florida College Democrats, and to groups like the Florida Future Leaders PAC, which is responsible for a lot of the brains behind recent operations in the youth community, they are the cutting edge. And what they're missing is accountability, marching orders, and financial support.
Okay, question in the back here?
All right, so hi Nick. We met earlier today. I learned that you're 18 years old, FAU College Democrat. This might not be a fair question for you, but since you were brought up to represent the youth, I see a problem in many of these indivisible groups is that they say we need young people. A 39-year-old would be considered young, but that's 20 years older than you. Which, like, you know, it's not like that's a problem or anything, but I just feel this huge gap between people for whom Social Security is the burning issue and people who don't. And going to college students for whom Social Security might as well just not exist. What do you see, since you've thought about this more than I have, that the party can do to be more appealing to people that are between 20 and 40 or 25 to 45? I have never expected to get Social Security. My generation will work until we die, so it's like not really, like it doesn't exist. But I don't really see issues of people like when you graduate to when you retire. Like what can happen there to improve outreach to those groups? It's just it's confusing to me.
So let's talk briefly about the issues. And I want to preface this by saying the issues don't matter nearly as much as the rhetoric and the strategy when it comes to winning back young voters. But as for the issues, Department of Education and scholarships. Because once young people see that they aren't getting money deposited in their tuition billing, that's when it starts to hurt. And the Democratic Party needs to be there to say, Trump did it. And the Democrats are going to restore it. When it comes to social issues, Amendment 4 was a huge boost in 2024 to bringing young voters to the polls. Not to mention Amendment 3. This is the easiest way I can get people who don't care about politics to care about politics. I have spoken to hundreds of frat guys who couldn't name the vice president in the last administration. But when I tell them, did you know that if you vote in the next election, you can legalize weed? They say, really? I can do that? I can vote to make policy directly? That's cool, bro. But it isn't so much about the policy as it is about the rhetoric and the strategy. I think that Trump has made huge inroads with young voters because he is the rebellious candidate. He is the anti-establishment candidate. I think something incredibly important to realize is that young people feel left behind by the democratic process in the country today. They aren't apathetic. They doom scroll, they hear about what's happening on Instagram and Twitter, and maybe occasionally they hear Fox News from the next room where their parents are watching TV. They know what's going on, and a lot of them don't like it, but they don't feel like they can make a difference. They don't see a clear way to get involved, to demonstrate, to organize, and many of them feel like their votes don't matter, especially here in Florida, especially in districts where Republicans have such a commanding majority. So Democrats need to stop taking the high road. They need to start speaking truth to power. It's a huge issue of rhetoric because Trump wins with young voters because he is rebellious. And now he is the authority. Democratic organizers need to find the spirit of the 60s and of rebellion to say, the new administration is authoritarian, they are telling you how to live their life, don't let them.
Okay, question over here.